In the last 3 years of being a managing partner at the firm I'm at right now, we've tripled in revenue with all organic growth, taking on zero debt. In that time, I've hired more people than I've ever hired before, and I've fired more people than I've ever fired before. And no one can prepare you for how lonely those decisions are. No one can prepare you for the time you will spend thinking about, did you do the right thing? Did you do the wrong thing? This is the entire premise of what I'm sharing this week on my newsletter, on the Plug newsletter. And it is all about how we take these really hard financial decisions and free up headspace by having a system in place, by having a checklist, by having a strategy of things to do. No one will prepare you for how lonely owning a business, operating a business, founding a business is. You will have to make hard decision after hard decision. And in those hard decisions, in those times where you have to make those hard decisions, you will often be lonely. You will ask people for advice, or they may give you advice, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you, and you know this. And that is what drives this loneliness. And so what I want to do this week, in this week's newsletter, in this week's video, is talk about a way that we can address that. Talk about a way that how can we free up headspace to know what we're going to do on our financial side, on our financial priorities, so it's one less decision you have to make. So famously, Steve Jobs wore jeans and a black turtleneck, right? The story is that in the 90s, this was his idea, is he was going to have the entire Apple company wear this as the outfit. This was going to be their uniform. And it was one less thing to think about, and it backfired. But as a part of the backfiring, he ended up with all these black shirts and jeans. And so that's all he wore. It was one less decision he had to make. He could free up that headspace for creativity, management, feedback, whatever. We can do the same thing here. We do the same thing by using checklists and using knowledge and writing things down and committing to a system, so that when you're in a stressful environment or a stressful time, you don't have to think. Right? So there's two people in the last 100 years that I think have really nailed this down in a couple of different ways. The first one I want to talk about is Abraham Maslow. Maslow was this kind of famous psychologist, and he lays out these hierarchy of needs, right? And so the pyramid of hierarchy of needs, if you can picture it, isn't really something that he created, but it's effectual, right? It makes sense. And so we walk you through these, before you can even move on to fulfilling spiritual needs and emotional needs and self-actualization, you have to take care of your basic physical needs. Right? You have to be fed. You have to feel safe. You have to be sheltered and be clothed. And it's all built on this psychology that no one can make this evolution to the next step and this next phase in life and psychology and emotional intelligence until your basic needs are met. And I think the exact same thing applies to finance, especially if you're a business owner, operator, or a founder, and you don't really have a finance professional on staff full time, or you don't have a finance background. A lot of the times we're left with this, what do I do now? And so it's helpful to kind of picture our financial priorities in this, right? You shouldn't think about taking massive profit distributions if you haven't done a couple of things before that first. What are those things, right? We're going to talk about those. Dave Ramsey is the other one, right? This kind of unlikely duo, but Dave Ramsey is the other one. This is more recent. And he has his 7 baby steps where you can walk your way to personal financial freedom by following just a couple of different steps, right? So Dave is a little bit more on the side of create a $1,000 emergency fund, which some say should be adjusted for inflation, probably, right? But after inflation, after the emergency fund, then you pay off high interest debt using the snowball method, right? Then you can pad a bigger emergency fund. Then you own your cars. Then you buy your home. You save all your saving for retirement, right? And then once all those things are taken care of, then you give. And he works with this great hierarchy of steps that you should just focus on. And what this does is it gives us a system to believe in and a process to follow. And when you have a system to believe in and a process to follow, it's one less decision you have to make. When everything's hitting the fan and you don't know what to work on next, this is what you do. You know exactly where you are in this hierarchy. And so I kind of threw these in. I said, okay, well, how does this apply to finance? How would an owner, a founder, or an operator use this, if he's charged with running the financial department or the finance team, or it's just him, there's no accountant on staff, like many small businesses don't have a full-time accountant. What does he do first, right? And so I distilled this down into 5 steps. The first step is padding working capital. And more than working capital, I encourage cash, because working capital can include accounts receivable, which you may or may not collect, inventory, right? So what I'm really concerned about here is cash. Have 6 months of operating expenses, fixed expenses, that you know you have to pay for on hand. Yes, your cash may build a little higher on the balance sheet. Some accountants or attorneys may tell you that's risky. Fine, I get it. Up your insurance. You need this cash quickly available and on hand to solve problems, to be your own insurance policy for little things that will hiccup. You do not want to be cash poor and over leveraged into things. So having a base amount of cash in there, put it in a high yield savings and earn 4%, 5% now, whatever it's going to be. This is step 1. Get a good cash balance. After you have that, pay down high interest debt. If you have a lot of credit cards, if you're living off credit cards, if your business has a lot of credit cards, keep those balances churning, right? Don't let that interest rack up on you. If you have really high term debt, you need to start working that down, right? I understand that finance and financing equipment is attractive, right? Especially if you can get it at low interest rates. Now, if you can get it at a really low interest rate, an attractive interest rate, totally understand. It may make sense. But unnecessary high interest debt is not helpful for a business. It's not helpful for that business to save money and de-risk and de-leverage itself from things that may happen or outside influences. The third is you want to reinvest sustainably in growth. This may look like hiring a salesperson, hiring new production staff, reinvesting in equipment that can up your capacity. But you want to do this responsibly. Right? We don't want to go out and bolt on 3 new firms, 3 new companies, 3 new arms or locations or branches when we haven't taken care of the first 2 things. Right? We don't want to think about really aggressive double revenue growth. It sounds great, but it's not sustainable. You want to do a couple of really good things first, build that cash balance, pay off this unnecessary debt, make sure you're growing. Everyone needs to grow to outpace inflation, fine. Be happy with 8 to 10% growth just until you can really solidify what you're doing else with the business and the cash flow. Right? Next, I'm a fan of owning your own real estate. Look across the country. Within 2 miles from my house I grew up in, there was a skating rink that I went to school. And when I was going to school, I would go to. The skating rink is still there. My kids have had birthday parties there. Some 30 years later, 40 years later, the skating rink is still there because they own their own real estate. They don't care what happens. They're not going to get called on a banknote, right? They're not concerned what's happening in the market. They're going to charge their fee and their rate. They own the real estate. They own it. They don't have to worry about rent rather getting jacked up and rent being raised, and now they can't afford that and they have to increase rates and worry about that. They just focus on what they have to focus on. Owning your own real estate and owning your own building is a great way to deleverage and a great way to de-risk. So I encourage you to do this. Finance it. Yes, you may need to finance the building and buy, but same thing. Pay that building down. Pay that debt down because it's building equity and in a property that you're improving and you're working in. Once you've done all this, then we talk about profit distributions, right? This is where people may have a difference in opinion. Maybe you want to forego profit distributions and completely reinvest in the business and go after really aggressive additions and try and get that hockey stick growth. Fine. That's totally fine. But what you do then, as you're adding on these fixed expenditures, you're right back at step 1. You then relook at your cash balance. What do you need to pay? Then you look at your debt. What is your high interest debt? Right? You keep growth going. But if you're going to substantially reinvest in the business and try and scale it super fast, again, know your runway, keep the cash on hand, follow the rules. Buy into a framework. And if you don't like my framework, build your own. But make sure you're committed to a system. Buy into it, follow it. It's one less thing you have to worry about in the middle of a customer not paying you, a vendor demanding payment, an employee quitting, right? You need to be able to answer these questions pretty quickly with when this stuff hits the fan, with what your plan of action is. That's it. This is all here to help business owners, founders, and operators focus. Focus on what they can take care of, focus on what they need to worry about, and leave the rest up to the professionals, right? You need to engage a finance professional for a lot of this stuff, fine. But at the end of the day, you should know what your fundamentals are. And these are the fundamentals. I'm going to leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it.